Welcome to the Mind of Business Success podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Cramer. Our guest today is Lisa Condon. She is a business strategist with a specialization in gratitude, which is a fantastic topic. So before we start to get into that, which I know is going to come up in this first question I'm going to ask you anyway, but we'll dig even deeper into that. Can you tell us a little bit about your business, Lisa?
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Yes, and again, my business, being a business strategist, I work with businesses and nonprofits and individuals to really build what their strategy is going to be to get them from here to the 2.0 version of themselves or of their business. And what does it take to do that? And I use a lot of values work, gratitude work. I actually build out a 9-step proprietary formula, if you will, all based in gratitude to really help somebody move through what that process looks like and businesses to work through that. I am a process geek at heart. I like to say that. I'm a Six Sigma black belt, so I really enjoy that work, but I do it in a way that is super meaningful and really based in those things that are really important to the individual or to the business.
I want to talk a little bit about why gratitude is important, not only in life, but in business, because a lot of people, they conceptually understand gratitude.
Yes.
They conceptually get that it is a good mindset.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people aren't actively practicing gratitude, or if they are, it's in a very superficial way.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about that.
And I'm glad to have that conversation. Thank you, because I agree with you. I think a lot of times I'm really grateful for my family. And especially around this time of year, we're heading into Thanksgiving, month of Thanksgiving for Americans, and everybody's thankful for everything. But the reality is, people and individuals, when they practice gratitude, actively practice it, they actually resonate at a happier spot. And when you think about business and why it's so important, if you really understand what your core values are for a business, and I'm not talking necessarily about bottom line, I'm talking about maybe your core values are around flexibility for your employees, and it's around family. And so because family is so important, if those core values are then built into your strategies, built into your goals, then guess what that's going to do for your employees? It's going to make them work differently, get excited differently, show up differently, and the retention of employees. But I think it's even more important because you're also going to attract the right clients. And so those clients who really align with the values that you have helps you set boundaries for your business. And it gives you the opportunities to say yes, but it also provides you that foundation from which to say no to those clients that really don't fit the work and the mold and the value system that you have.
That's powerful. Now, I have a master's degree in metaphysical science. So some people will classify me as being a bit woo. But from a very, very practical perspective, I've been studying universal laws and principles for a very, very long time, long before the secret was like the popular trendy thing, and the law of attraction was like a commonly used term. But when we're talking about emotions and we're talking about vibration, we're talking about resonance, we're talking about mindset, on a very, very practical level, we know that when we're around somebody who is very negative, it's unproductive. They're unproductive. There's no synergy. There's no harmony. It falls flat. It doesn't really have potential to grow into something lucrative, productive, positive, right? So we can all agree that being a negative Nancy is just not a very productive state to be in as a business owner, as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
But now when we look at gratitude and we recognize that all emotions have this sort of vibrational frequency, we'll say. We can feel it in our body. You can feel the difference between when you're scared versus when you're feeling confident versus when you're feeling in love. And gratitude is one of those extremely high vibrational emotions. And it's interesting because the practice of gratitude does have that positive influence on our relationships, on our productivity, on our mindset, and on the results that we're getting in our business.
100%. And you I think hit a really critical point, which is the practicing of gratitude. And even taking a step back, it takes 21 days to create a habit, or depending on who you ask, it could be a little bit longer. But the reality is practicing gratitude is difficult when you first start off. And you have to figure out what that looks like for yourself. I have something that I've been doing now for almost 13 years. And it's a daily practice that I do every single day. And when I first started off, I could tell when I didn't practice it. I would feel off and I didn't really know why. And then it would resonate with me. Oh my goodness, I didn't do my practice in the morning. But that lends itself into, again, with your business, and you really understand starting with your why and reminding yourself, and how often do businesses actually go back and look at, why did I start this? And what are the core values? And am I building that into every single thing that I'm doing? Am I walking the walk? And oftentimes in businesses I work with all the time, of all shapes and sizes, solopreneurs to businesses who are, Fortune 500 corporations, they don't. And it's because they just keep evolving. And there's nothing wrong with growth. As a matter of fact, that's what most for-profit businesses want to do, and nonprofit organizations, just in different ways. But when you look back to the why, and you look back to those foundational moments, and you really understand deeply what you wanted to do and what you were bringing to the world with your business, that's where gratitude starts. That's where that connection starts. And so there's different ways, again, of how do you practice that? And then how do you engage your employees or your customers or your stakeholders in that practice? What does that look like? And it's going to look different, I think, for every company, but it has to be built in with your strategy, with your daily practices. Something, as you were talking, something I had not thought about for years, and I mean years. When I worked for a corporate organization, when I was in charge of a sales team, and the difference of putting out goals versus, hey, guess what so-and-so did? And wow, they really made an impact by doing this, and they really impacted this customer's life. Those were the stories that resonated and motivated people when they learned how their impact, or what they did, impacted somebody else, versus I'm just making money for the company. So again, it's that shift in mindset, and it's that shift in strategy for our businesses.
I have to ask, how do you, because as individuals, as business people, we understand there are certain things that we can do to put into practice in our life. But when we're talking about within an organization or with shareholders, how does that work? How do you, and I know it's probably, it varies slightly, but can you give us an idea of what that looks like? How do you start to impregnate even that concept of gratitude in those types of environments?
Sure. Yeah. And you're right. It is very different with each environment, because every company has its own personality. And so you have to make sure to meet them where they're at. But I can definitely give some examples of how I've helped companies figure out some of the best ways to really penetrate that conversation. And it starts with the people. It always starts with the people. And So I've instituted kudos boards on their website, like an internal intranet site, where they can recognize and show gratitude for something that other coworkers may have done for them. Or there's a peer-to-peer recognition program actually that I helped start years and years ago, and it's still going on to this day. And then now there's, I think, prizes. They get thrown into a drawing and there's prizes, but it really starts with those touch points of just small little things. What did you do that I'm really grateful for? But I also really encourage businesses, especially from a job description standpoint, what does it look like to understand your employees when somebody gets hired, and what motivates them? Why are you glad that they're here? And so I do this actually for employees that I hire. The first thing they get is an I love me folder, and I give that to them. Now I do it electronically, but as things come up, and whether it's from other employees, whether it's from customers, anything that comes in that it says something good or they've done something great for the company, it goes into that folder so you can go back and look at that. But I also think it goes back to building out your strategy, all based around the core values of your company. And your mission and vision and your purpose is one thing, but those core values have to resonate in every way, shape, or form, in every goal that you set, in every job description you have, in every employee all staff meeting that you have to constantly be talking about that and bringing people back to the why. And when you understand what your core values are as a company, it's not what the CEO believes that their core values are. It's the company's core values. When you constantly bring people back to that, it just helps with that mind shift. And it all starts there. And once you start seeing that shift, then you can spark things differently. You can innovate differently. You can communicate differently. But it has to start going back to that why and to that base foundation.
What are you seeing as the tangible and intangible benefits of incorporating this into these businesses?
Yeah. So the tangible, for sure, retention of employees, those that actually have followed, I would say, the process that I built, but in general, you can do a lot of research on this, but the retention of employees is actually 70% higher in companies who actually know what their core values are and they build them in to their practices in whatever way that looks like. I'd love to see it holistically across the board, but some build it in different ways. But again, 70% higher retention rate than companies that don't do that. That's a big, big deal, because then you're not spending dollars on training and recreating the wheel and having to re-engineer things. So you're actually spending time, energy, and resources on the right things, which is customer experience and improvement of your services or expansion of your services. So that's one major tangible way. But I think the intangibles are the way that staff just resonates with one another. That's always a really big deal. And you feel it. I think whenever you walk into a brick and mortar company, what the feeling is like. The atmosphere just feels a certain way, and it's funny, you talk about woo. Yes, yes, I get that word too. I'm woo, but that's okay. But you can walk in and you can feel that atmosphere and that energy. And when you talk about the higher vibration of people who practice gratitude, you feel that, and you inherently are happier, or you inherently feel different when you walk into that environment. And that will shift your mindset. So think about this. You walk into a coffee shop and you feel this really wonderful vibration. Maybe you've been having not such a great day. That's going to shift your mindset. You're going to leave happier when you walk out of there and with a different energy, and you might not even understand why. And guess what? The next meeting that you go into, you're operating at a different vibrancy, and that's going to impact the people that you're meeting with. And it's that domino effect. To me, that intangible is a beautiful intangible, but it creates better conversations business-wise, it actually creates more creativity and innovation. And the communication is actually more open when people are vibrating at that gratitude level.
Well, when you mentioned the increased retention rate, that is, I mean, that's significant, right? But now let's go back to your coffee shop example. Now, let's say I own that coffee shop and my staff is in that high vibrational state. So now when my customers come in to my business, they're having that positive association, they're having that positive experience. What does that do for customer retention?
You know, that's a great question. And I don't have any numbers on that. But when you think about it, who wouldn't want to go back to a place that makes them feel good? You know, if you think about in your own life, what are the places you frequent? You know, what restaurants do you frequent and why do you go there? You know, many restaurants serve the same type of food. Many coffee shops, serve coffee, but it's all in how they make you feel. And so you will continue to go back to that place. So you're going, and on top of that, who are you going to tell? Your friends, your family. You've got to try this place out. There's just something different about it. And it's probably not the taste of the coffee. So, but you know what? I appreciate that question because I actually am going to do some research and get some numbers on that because it's an important piece of this whole conversation for sure.
When we are looking at implementing things in our business, there is usually some emphasis on the return on our investment. And there are certainly some people who get it. They say to themselves, okay, well, if I could get my employee retention rate up, then that is going to be a positive return on my investment for sure. But now when we think about that, how that translates to your client or customer experience, well, now that return on investment could be exponential because every one of us have had many experiences doing business with a company and not having the warm and fuzzies, feeling like we were an inconvenience, feeling like they didn't give a damn about us. And how many times have we stopped doing business with these different product and service providers because we had a bad experience, because the mindset was off, the vibration was off. They weren't grateful for our business. Right.
Absolutely. And, you know, there is a stat on that too, where if you have a bad experience, you're going to tell 10 people about that bad experience. If you have a good experience, oftentimes you only tell one person. However, if you have an experience where you feel valued, then actually you will tell 12 people. So once again, the gratitude and that feeling of vibration of gratitude exceeds even the negative. However, a negative experience, they're still telling 10 people, and those 10 people will tell other people as well. So while gratitude reigns supreme, and I will stand by that, you have to be really cognizant of what is happening and making sure that when you're hiring your employees, that they understand the value of your company. And especially with that experience, how do you want to make your customers feel? How do you want your vendors to feel? Because again, vendors there's so many of them out there, but you want to make sure that you're working with the right people across the board who live and breathe in that same value system that you put out there. And it just makes for this community, this organic community of working and doing business again in this higher frequency. And and from a return on investment standpoint, again, I think some of it's the intangibles that come with that, but you can see things like with process development or process reengineering. When you're walking through that and you look at what Jack Welch did with Six Sigma back in the day when he first really pushed it out there in production lines, you can take that and extrapolate it to any business. And you can talk about the why you're making decisions and why you're tightening certain things up and how ultimately that's going to influence that experience of gratitude and values with those customers and how it's going to impact them. So you can actually speak to that. But when you're looking at some of those redundancies in process and you're building that into your plan, think about the cost savings in that, the time savings in that. And when you can look at those dollars that you're saving, even from building out a process and changing it up, then what are you doing with those dollars? And is that matching, what your value system is? Are you giving it back in the right ways? If you have in one of your core values, I'll go back to the family one, and you've built that into your benefits for your employees, for example, then would those extra dollars go to giving more time off, which then would touch your flexibility and family time? What are you doing with those and how are you connecting those dots?
Such good stuff. So we have beautifully blended the woo with the practical.
Yes, I love that.
Let's pivot. I want to talk about you as a business owner. Mm-hmm. We've all had our fair share of internal obstacles on our journey. Can you share with us one of your mindset breakthroughs? What have you experienced? Just one thing. Maybe it was a big thing. Maybe it was a, so thing, but it was one of those things that helped you to get to where you are today.
Absolutely. And I love sharing this story because it changed my life. So I was working in the corporate world, and I like to say I grew professionally in the corporate world, and I was always in C-suite. I always had big teams, and it never felt right, but you walk the walk, you figure it out. And I one day had, so I was in the newspaper industry, and I was in charge of sales folks, and two of my team members were employment reps and for advertising, and they got a windfall. IBM was hiring for a lot of jobs, and they just blew their goal out of the water. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. The publisher came down and told me that I could not pay them out what they earned for that goal because it was too much money. And I fought this because there was no cap on their goal. Fast forward, after a lot of conversations, they did get paid. We ended up having to change the goal structure and that there was a cap. But what I realized in that moment was the core value of the company that I was working for was greed, and it was money. And that did not align with my heart and how I wanted to lead my life. And that's when I became really disenchanted, and I knew I had to do something different. And so I did. Ultimately, it led to me starting my company. There's a lot of steps that happened in between there, but that moment in time when I said, wow, you are literally doing a disservice to people that I care very much about as my employees, but also just being a good human being. And, so again, it was that value misalignment, and I didn't know what to call it at the time. I didn't start doing my value work until years later, but I knew something was misaligned. And that moment changed my life. It changed everything about how I did things, how I interacted with people, making sure that I was leading with my authentic self.
Powerful. That is what clicked you into your own alignment with your mission. Mm-hmm. And feeling it, you felt it before you had that very significant in your face confrontation with it.
Yes.
You did feel it. You didn't know what to do with it, which is so incredibly common. We feel it, and our conditioning tells us all of these seemingly justifiable reasons why we should not do anything about it. Mm-hmm. And so we never give it the proper attention to start to dismantle what is really going on there, and to dissect it and to see, wait a second, something feels off here. There's a reason that I feel this way.
Mm-hmm.
I just did another interview. I had a couple back-to-backs with pre-recording, fantastic guest, lovely conversation, powerhouse woman. And she had made a comment about how we can't trust our feelings, because a 3-year-old would want to, run out into the road. And in a roundabout way, she was kind of trying to make a valid point, but from kind of a limited perspective, a limited belief perspective. And the reality is that we do have inner guidance, and we can feel when something is off. Now, there's a distinction between inner guidance that says, don't step out into the street right now, which in many cases, a child has not developed that level of, that's why parents take care of babies, right? They have not developed that yet. There is a series of stages that we go through to develop these proficiencies. But there's a distinction between our inner guidance saying something's off here, and the feeling of fear that we have that's keeping us stuck in a pattern or a situation that is out of alignment and incongruent with who we really are. Mm-hmm. And you can feel that distinction if you're willing to.
I could not agree more. And so I talk a lot about what I call the foundational garden, and it's for people, it's for businesses. But if you think about a garden and you think about all the seeds that have been planted in your garden, and that's going to be what you've been told from friends, teachers, family, you name it, or experiences that you've had from, clients and other business holders and stakeholders. All of these are planted in your soil. And then it's up to you what you water. And do you want a garden that's filled with weeds and things that aren't really colorful and things that don't bring you a lot of gratitude and joy? And it's all the negative things that are resonating. If that's what you're watering, imagine what your garden would look like. It's not really pretty. But if you're watering those things that, I'm looking at the sign you have in your background, I can and I will, things that are powerful and confident and things that have brought joy to other people or joy to you, and you're watering that, then guess what? Your garden's going to flourish, and it's going to be beautiful and bright, and it's going to be cultivated. And if your garden in your mind happens to have vegetables, guess what? You can continue feeding yourself from your garden. So it's really about what it is that you're paying attention to, what you're giving time and energy to, and how you're going to help that with the growth of yourself, your business, your employees, and so on.
That is a fantastic analogy. I just had a session with a client a couple of days ago who was feeling a little discouraged. She had bumped up against one of her old, unresolved, unhealed things. It happens to all of us. Every time you are up leveling, you're going to encounter old stuff. And the metaphor that I used is very, very similar. And I explained to her that you have created a beautiful flower garden with all of the inner work that you have done and all of the beautiful things that you are doing in your life and in your business. And sometimes we have weeds. That's that subconscious conditioning that it's not true. It's just stuff that you have acquired from other people, from society, from parents, from having an experience when you were younger and not really processing it in a wise, empowered way, right? And when you have that big weed in your beautiful flower garden, there is that tendency to just focus on the weed. And somehow we're able to almost just not see all of the beautiful flowers that we have planted, that are flourishing, that are thriving, that are growing. But like the work that I do with my clients is I go in there and I help them to pull out that weed from the roots. Mm-hmm. Because if you try, and sometimes it works, sometimes it's valuable, sometimes you say it's just a little weed, it's not that big of a deal. And in some cases that's true. But in many cases, if it keeps triggering us, if we keep getting pulled back to us, that weed is not going to go away. And as many times as you try to focus on those beautiful flowers, that weed is just nagging at you. It's just nagging at you. If you feel the nag, if you keep being triggered, that's your feelings indicating to you there's something I need to look at here. Mm-hmm. And then we have to uproot that weed. It is not serving you to just try to pretend that it's not there. You're not succeeding at that. That's not working.
Right. And it's, so I love that. And in gratitude and the process of gratitude and the book I have coming out, the U in gratitude stands for uncover. And it's exactly what you're talking about. As you're leveling up, no matter if it's to 2.0 or 10.0 version of yourself or your business, you will always uncover things. Something's going to trigger you. Something's going to show itself as not aligning. And it happens. It happens to everybody at every level. It's what you do with it and how you deal with it. And do you integrate it in the learning that you have from that or not? And so I love the work that you do. And do you pull out the weed from its roots? And that's an important conversation to have with yourself and with your business. And what that looks like. I think that's great. I use the rock analogy. I say you pick up the rock, and underneath the rock, you're going to have everything underneath it. It's going to be mossy. There might be some dirt. There might be some bugs. How do you polish that? And then do you put it back in your garden, or do you just crush it and throw it out and put it out into the field?
I have a very positive association with crushing boulders. So what a catalyzing moment for me was back in 2005. I was out with some girlfriends and I was given a date rape drug. And when I came to, I had been physically and sexually assaulted. And I was not in a very empowered mindset before that. That really, really messed me up. And I was struggling with symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. It was really, really a dark place in my life. But with all catalyzing experiences, I was faced with that decision point. Am I going to allow this to be like a slow, painful, sad death because I couldn't function as a normal, healthy human being, or am I going to do something about it? And I knew medication was not going to be an option. I knew I had to find a cure. And that was the moment that put me on a deep and profound healing journey. And one of the therapies that I had gone to was hypnotherapy, which is, in part why I later became a certified hypnotherapist and then opened my hypnotherapy practice. But the exercise that he took me through was all of the anger, seeing all of the anger that I had felt for being violated and hurt, and seeing it in this big boulder. And I had this hammer that had the ability to break that boulder. And I can remember it so incredibly clearly, just beating that and watching it become pebbles, and then still beating it until it literally was dust. And when it was dust, it was gone and I was done. Mm-hmm. And prior to that, I had such bad insomnia. I would wake up in the middle of the night shaking like I was, in a state of hypothermic shock. And after that experience, even having insomnia prior to the event, I was able to finally sleep like a baby.
Wow.
Through the night. And I love sleeping. I will tell you, friends, I love my sleep.
That is incredibly powerful. And being a survivor myself of sexual assault, but when I was a child, I completely understand like the the impacts and influence that it has in everything that you do, business or otherwise. So I really applaud you for making that a catalyst for your journey. That's huge. That's a huge deal. So I just want to make sure I acknowledge that for you. And I love the fact that you're using that experience to basically give back to others, through your business and in ways that help change your life. Right. And that's how you're then resonating, giving that back and being able to take people down whatever path they need to get down so they can get their boulders down to pebbles, down to dust, whatever that looks like. That's beautiful. And I love that. That's great.
So we have to make sure that our listeners know how they can connect with you.
Absolutely. So the best way is to go through my website, which is super easy, lisacondon.com. And you can email me, lisa@lisacondon.com. I am on Facebook as well. And guess what? Lisa Condon. That's where I'm at on Facebook. I am on Instagram as well. And that's Lisa Condon Spark. My mission is to spark inspiration, innovation, and collaboration through gratitude. So I do call myself the Spark. So you'll see that out there. And I am on LinkedIn as well. So I would love if you reached out to me, definitely mention that you've listened to this podcast. I'd like to really understand what resonated with you. And yes, so please, any of those ways you can feel free to find me.
This has been a fantastic conversation. Probably one of my favorites because we got to talk about energy, and that's my jam. I love to talk about the woo.
I would love to talk about that. I build intuitiveness into my work as well. So we'll talk about that another time.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. This has been fantastic.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here, and thank you for this wonderful conversation. It's actually added such joy to my day. So thank you so much.
So we can both be grateful for it.
Yes.
And hopefully our listeners are grateful too. And to our listeners, I want to express my gratitude and remind you, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe because we have incredible guests and incredible conversations. Fantastic content. It is my pleasure to be doing this for all of you. So until next time, we'll see you in the next episode.